and restricted. However, the court dismissed his challenge. Here we are, live pictures coming in from the inauguration of Uhuru Kenyatta.
You may be seated, ladies and gentlemen.
Live pictures here as they're laying down the red carpet there for the swearing-in of Uhuru Kenyatta. More than 20 heads of state or senior ministers are attending the event right now. World leaders too. We believe that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is there, the Ugandan President Museveni, and the Rwandan President Paul Kagame. And there's the man himself, Uhuru Kenyatta. Thousands of Kenyatta's supporters have gathered in the stadium for the inauguration. There were, we're told, some scenes of chaos outside when some people without seats tried to rush in and take somebody else's seats. They were driven back by police with tear gas. We're not told whether there have been any injuries or not. But of course, that's a reminder that this election comes after a very difficult election process in Kenya. Two disputed polls leading to a whole series of deadly street protests. Security, of course, has been stepped up after Raila Odinga, the opposition leader, said he would hold a memorial rally at the same time. That's to honour the more than 50 people that were killed in the protest. Live pictures there of Uhuru Kenyatta for his second swearing-in ceremony in the stadium in Kenya. Well, let's talk now to our expert, Mr. Mark Bichachi, political commentator and communication strategist. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. So, he's just delivering a speech. He's being inaugurated right now. What kind of message do you think he will bring to the country today?
The message that the president is likely to bring to the country is one of development and in terms of the infrastructure and plans that he has for the country. And the second message, of course, has to deal with the fact that he has a task of bringing the nation together and helping it heal from the electoral process, in the sense that moving the country forward in terms of, can we work together now that the electoral process is finally over?
Talk to us a little bit about this rally that Raila Odinga was planning to stage, a massive rally to commemorate the dead, I believe.
Yes. Well, Raila Odinga has very little option than to hold this particular rally, because the air, as it were, is running out of his tires of his political campaign in this particular period, because every plan that he'd hoped would stop and stay the second inauguration of President Kenyatta has failed. So in terms of strategy, his hope is that there'll be two stories coming out of Kenya today. The first story being the inauguration of the president, and the second story being that the opposition was out in the streets making noise and having a demonstration. However, so far the situation has been calm from that side, and if that stays, then probably Raila Odinga will not be able to give out the message that Kenya has a disgruntled population towards that. But that's really what he's hoping to do, that the international community can see that a section of Kenya is rather disgruntled concerning this particular election.
But looking at these pictures coming in to us, we don't see any sign of people being disgruntled. What we see is almost a superstar there, a superstar politician, yes, in a stadium where everyone is cheering him, everyone is wishing him well. What would you say, what message would you say that gives out to the rest of Kenya?
Well, the message that it gives out to the rest of Kenya is very simple. that Jubilee as a party did have support, and President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy, William Samoei Arap Ruto, do command a large section of this country supports them. And that was shown in the August 8th election, it was shown in the October 26th election, and this is a reflection. I don't think there's any Kenyan who's sitting at home who's surprised by the number of people who've shown up to show their support for Uhuru Kenyatta. That being said, there's still a very a significant section of the country that did not vote for Uhuru Kenyatta, and because of the nature of our politics, politics in Kenya is taken rather personally, and there is a section of the country that is gloomy today. However, in the structure of Kenya, in the history of our nation, we have bounced back from such situations before, and we'll be back to business as usual in a matter of days, if not weeks.
Would you say then that these events now, these pictures that we're seeing now, are in any way stage managed?
No, they're not stage managed at all. It is quite difficult to stage manage the numbers that we are seeing today, because the reality of the matter, if you look at the number of votes, especially where the president is, the city governor of Nairobi is a Jubilee governor. He is in the president's party. So we know for a fact that there's a large percentage of people in this city alone, who number in the millions, who are in the support of President Uhuru Kenyatta. This, I can tell you for sure, has not been stage managed at all. This is not a Mugabe situation.
No, I'm sure it's not a Mugabe situation. We are expecting him to come and make a speech any minute now, and we'll obviously be staying on these pictures until he does make a speech. What sort of thing do you think he's likely to talk about in this speech? Is he going to embrace the whole of Kenya and ask for the support of his non-supporters as well as his supporters? Because traditionally at this time, when there's any presidential swearing in, it's a time for the president to unite his supporters with those that haven't supported him. Is that his policy, do you think?
Absolutely it is, because on Sunday he did make a speech and saying that it's time for Kenya to dialogue, it's time for Kenya to come together and chart a way forward. So definitely everyone's expectation, including my own, is that he will speak to the matters of those people who did not vote for him. I expect, in fact, for him to take some of the issues that have galvanized support for Mr. Odinga and say that they will be part of his plans as an administration, that he will try to have an all-inclusive government as demanded by the Constitution. I think he will talk about his cabinet, that it will be the face of the nation, bearing our tribal and ethnic backgrounds. So he will talk about bringing the country together. He will also talk about bringing the country together in as far as the framework of developing the country and bringing prosperity to the Kenyan people, regardless of tribe, creed, tongue, and religion. That will be the focus of his message. I expect it to be very reconciliatory. I expect he will try and say that he's willing to talk to the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga and indeed his team, and see how together they can chart a way forward for this great nation called Kenya.
Okay, well, we're just waiting for the President to make his swearing-in speech, his inauguration speech. But before he actually gets up to the podium, just quickly, if you wouldn't mind, Mark, do you think after all of these irregularities that we've seen, after the Supreme Court annulled the original poll, do you think that he has been damaged politically by that?
Well, the truth of the Kenyan political cycle is that Kenyans believe in their leaders by hook and crook. And whereas in the West you'd expect that if there is any shadow of taint or doubt, it would affect the credibility of a president. Not so in Kenya. In fact, what typically tends to happen is we rally behind our leaders to support even harder when things seem to be thick on the legal side, on the perception side. And I'll remind you that, let's remember that Uhuru Kenyatta has overcome great odds. Let's remember in 2013 he became president despite the fact that there was a case at The Hague, and even after he was vindicated at The Hague, his supporters have only grown stronger. So as far as his supporters are concerned, yes, he's still the president, he's legitimately elected, but the opposition will definitely try to get mileage out of of the annulment of the election that was held in August. But however, the problem and the difficulty that the opposition will have is after that particular ruling is different petitions for different positions of governor, member of parliament, and different positions across the country. Cases have been thrown out one after the other, proving that there was a lot of credibility in the August election. And as such, in fact, there's probability that as we look back and as the investigations go on, then the story will turn to find out, was there anything that happened that was done wrongly in terms of the ruling, or what is done wrongly in terms of the election? And that's going to be a debate in the country, but no, it's not going to quite adversely affect the presidency of Uhuru Kenyatta.
What now for Raila Odinga, do you think? Where does he go for now? Is he finished? Is he over?
One would be very naive to count Raila out. He's never been down for the count in 1982 when he was taken to prison. He was not down for the count in 1992. He was not down for the count after his father died and he fought for the supremacy of one of the largest parties then. He was not down for the count when he joined former President Moi. We've counted his losses many times and he's always bounced back. Raila Odinga's elastic limit is larger than a rubber band, so it would be naive to count him out. And let's also remember that he has massive fanatical support. He has a base that is completely dedicated to him and considers him almost as like a spiritual leader, if you will. And therefore, his support base is still strong. The question really is, how will he bounce back as? Because he really has two options. The first option is to continue being the kingpin of opposition politics in the country, or to begin to front one of his deputies to take over from his reins. Either way, we are not seeing the end of Raila Odinga's political career anytime soon.
Mark, you were talking there about how passionate Raila Odinga's supporters are, and you were talking about how passionate supporters of Uhuru Kenyatta are, and how significant this election has been. And yet there was only a turnout of under 39%. Why do you think so few people actually left their homes, went to the polling station and voted in what was such a significant election?
Well, you know, the most interesting thing about Kenyan politics, and this will easily explain the voter turnout issue, is first and foremost the people who would have ordinarily voted for Raila Odinga stayed home. So discount 40% of the votes just by that. The second thing, let's remember that within the nation there are certain people who do not vote for Uhuru Kenyatta but rather vote against Raila Odinga. And those people who vote against Raila Odinga would ordinarily be a vote for Uhuru Kenyatta. So therefore what happened on the 26th is simply the fact that those who would vote for Raila Odinga stayed home, and those who would ordinarily vote against him did not go to the polling stations, because there was no point of showing up to a fight if your opponent is not going to show up.
Mark Bajaji, live from Nairobi, thank you very much indeed for joining me. Well, we'll hopefully be bringing you Uhuru Kenyatta's speech when he makes it in just a couple of minutes. But first, let's take a quick break. Stay with us.
This is CGTN.
You're watching CGTN. I'm Jeff Moody, live in Beijing.
You're watching CGTN.
Coming to you from Washington, D.C.
You're watching CGTN.
Coming to you from my room.
I'm members of this.
Mark, what can you tell us about events happening there?
Politics
This is a pretty picture. Time you can see
back over to Beijing.
to go after them.
All about
This is CGTN. CGTN. See the difference.
In this fast-changing information age,
news and news media are evolving quickly. Truthful or neutral, inclusive or polarized, the debate never ends. CGTN brings together the world's top media leaders and experts to Sanya to discuss a shared future. Join us for 2 days of discussions and insights at the CGTN Global Media Summit and see the difference.
Right, let's turn now to Indonesia, where Mount Agung in Bali continues to erupt. Around 40,000 people have been evacuated and the Resort Islands International Airport will remain closed till Wednesday morning. Our correspondent Silkina Aluwalia has more details.
Authorities have confirmed that Bali's international airport will be closed down for another 24 hours. They extended the closure period as Mount Agung continues to show increasing activity as of this morning. They also confirmed that they didn't find volcanic ash in Bali's airport particularly, but the airspace surrounding the area is still heavily covered in ash. And the ash has reached around 3,000 meters up in the air. And if we look at it, tourist areas are quite far